the discussion that will follow after this. And without to add in another perspective onto the whole discussion, I'd like to introduce Musa. If you could introduce himself and stick to the 15 minutes.
Thank you very much, Philo.
Welcome.
Please permit me to stand. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, colleagues, youth, and youth servers, of course, I can say. Of course, I am Musa Ansumana Soko, an African born in Sierra Leone. I am serving on the Interim Youth Advisory Board of UN Habitat, representing Africa. I am co-founder of the Youth Partnership for Peace and Development and executive coordinator. And of course, I am also serving as the national focal person for the United Nations Millennium Campaign in Sierra Leone. Without much ado, it's a clear manifestation that various agencies, various people at various levels have bestowed confidence in young people. So I'll therefore say I'm proud of being called a youth, because that gives me the special zeal, the anxiety to do more, the anxiety to do something I feel the adults can also follow. So it's not about disputing the fact that I wouldn't like to be called a youth. I am a youth because it's a stage. You know, the world is all about stage. You know, you move from one ladder to the other. Before now I was a child, and now I'm a youth. So I just want to prove that aspect of youth, youthfulness, you know, in making sure that I'm able to contribute to my world in my own little way. But before I proceed with my presentation, I would like to throw a brief question to you, or, you cannot answer for now, but it's just kind of a thought-provoking something. Looking at the levels of youth participation in Africa, we know there are various levels. One, adult initiated and led, but also having some component of youth participation in it. We've got the one young people initiate, but also wanting adults to participate in it. And we've got youth initiated and led. So which of these levels do we think are more effective for the continent's development? Especially when we look at the African urban future, 20 years from now, what's going to happen? You know, if you watch the movie 100 years from now about climate change and how it's going to affect generations, you're beginning to wonder the societies we're living in today and how we are contributing towards that 100 years from now, looking at the disasters it might create someday. As I leave you with this question, it's a kind of thought-provoking one. How do we make sure these approaches are more effective? You know, looking at youth having a vote on the governing council. Esther said it, you do not really need to be there. You can start from the lower level, and your local action can be translated into global action. It is always possible, and even continental level. Why do we think we are all here? It's because of our own smaller things we've been doing at our own grassroots levels, made UN Habitat to acknowledge our efforts, that we are of course key stakeholders, and they've moved from that paradigm of youth serving as beneficiaries, youth serving as agents of research, youth serving as problems, or even challenges, but as co-creative partners in development. I just want to urge you all, we should refrain from that aspect of giving us the votes. Yes, it's of course good for us to have a vote, but what if you create the platform for me to vote? Okay, what becomes the output of my vote? You know, so it's a kind of slower process, but let's all be proud of being a party to that slower change that happens someday. My presentation is going to look at 3 specific aspects. It's looking at youth participation in decision making in Africa from the broader perspective, looking at models of participation, best program practices, and of course looking at policy options, coming out with my recommendations to the conclusion. We know in Africa there have been series of platforms created for and by young people, but like, how do we make sure these platforms are more effective? So I would like to project on this and see how best we can be able to chart the way forward in respect to the essence why we are here. We can say youth in decision making in the current millennium is an innovative driver towards ensuring that young people have got a safer place in society. Like I said earlier, young people have been from, activism for policy change to grassroots actions that can be translated into global action, like I said earlier. So the World Programme of Action for Youth to the year 2000 and beyond, with its initial 10-point agenda for young people, now making 15, recently included 5 more, is a clear manifestation that the United Nations systems, its member states and governments have got youth in the heart of their national development agenda. But the problem here is, how do we harness that interest? How do we make sure that interest prioritizes us in the national budget? How do we make sure that interest is able to bring us to the governing council, like Musa rightly maintained? How do we make sure that these resolutions passed by the United Nations and its member states provision that says every government delegation there must be a youth representative within it? How do we make sure we are able to foster that to become a reality? That's a common concern for us all. However, in practice, youth exercising authority over themselves is a clear evidence that they no longer want to be seen as object of research, as beneficiaries, like I rightly said earlier, but as people that can also steer the wheel. How can you steer the wheel yourself? How can I meet Philo and say, Philo, I've got this initiative. How do you think we can work on it at the continental level or our own small level? But then, what will have we got to make that change? How do we go? How are we going to affect that change to happen? It's all a gradual but slower process. We must all acknowledge. Youth as social actors of change can serve as pressure group to lobby government in defining their priorities. It has been clearly stressed that youth are not leaders of tomorrow, but as partners of today. It is important to strive towards the involvement of young people as active citizens in decision-making processes at all levels, looking at local, continental, and even global levels, as we are seeing today in the case of UN Habitat. I'm sure it is the very fact that UN Habitat has got young people into, in their programming. But of course, let's see how best we can actively engage young people. We know there are various programs relating to young people with various organizations or UN bodies. But we know this is the very platform. What can we put on the table for UN Habitat to buy for years to come? We are now on the road to what? To where Naples. How do we make sure we are able to reflect our views as prior to the World Urban Forum 6? So it is very much important that we are here, and it is by no means a mistake. Thank you very much, UN Habitat. I will look at the specific models of youth participation in the continent. We've got youth parliaments. Of course, those that were at the youth in the urban governance session yesterday, people spoke about youth parliament in, of course, from Tanzania. Gadi spoke about it, Rwanda, and of course Liberia. These are all models that have operated very well, and I'm sure most of our countries have got youth parliaments, and in sub-regional Africa there is what they call the Mano River Union Youth Parliament. So these are all effective ways young people have decided mobilizing themselves in ensuring that they are able to contribute their own part of the social contract. Yes, youth forums and national youth councils, municipal junior youth councils, as it is in the case of Tanzania and other countries I might not know. Youth research as an empowerment tool, participation in managing their own organizations. You know, managing organization is not just too easy. You know, it takes the special zeal, the special courage and enthusiasm. So if you see a young person like the Keshwasha group in Kenya, you know, they are living in the slum, but you know, they build inspiration from the daily struggles of their colleagues living in the slum, which of course should be emulated by other young people. It's more or less motivating the next young person that of course you can do it, I can do it, and we can all do it together. We've got participation in conferences as it is here now at both regional, national, and international. You know, looking at program design, implementation, and evaluation. To some level, youth have been actively involved in some of these processes. The level of participation, but we are also looking at participation versus engagement. Now we've participated, what becomes the outcomes of our participation is something we must always think of as we go to programs and events. What's next? After this, so what? You know, these are what we should be thinking of. You should also be given a voice in national community programs and projects. They should be transformed from more participants into partners and from beneficiaries of programs into resources for programs.